Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Richmond Highway Funding Plan Public Meeting presentation. I am Mike Garcia, and I'll be your facilitator this afternoon. This is the second of two public meetings with the other one that was held last night. Today, you're going to hear about the list of projects that we will use to determine the total amount that the funding plan will be based on. So these projects were pulled from the comprehensive plan, and Zach will go into additional details during the presentation. There will be additional public meetings in the future that will go over the various types of funding options that could be used to create the funding portion of the funding plan. But first, we have to determine the bucket of improvements, which is why we are here today. With that said, I just wanted to take a moment and recognize Supervisor Lusk from Franconia District. Supervisor, if you have any remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
All right, perfect. Delighted to be here and want to thank all of the folks that are here on this Zoom. This is an opportunity for us to hear about what I think is one of the most significant projects happening here in Fairfax County, and specifically for the southeastern portion of Fairfax. I was fortunate to be able to serve on the Embark Richmond Highway plan many years ago, and it's nice to see that we're progressing to getting to a place where it'll actually come to fruition. So this discussion today, I think, is important, making sure we talk about some of these transportation-related improvements, and then thinking about sidewalks, trails, and some of the grid streets, and making sure that those are elements that are a part. So I look forward to hearing the comments from those that are here on the Zoom, and again, want to acknowledge and appreciate your participation, and thank you as well, Garcia.
Thank you, Supervisor. Okay, before we get started, I just want to get a few other things out of the way so people know when to expect comments and the like. So we will pause throughout portions of the presentation to take any sort of comments you have. We have kind of four distinct spots where we'll actually pause and kind of give anybody the chance to ask questions, comments, your choice. If you put anything into the chat, which is enabled, please feel free to do so at any time. If it's a comment, we will take it down and note it. If it's a question, we'll answer it during this presentation. We will be stopping at 1 o'clock just as a hard stop, because trying to respect everyone's lunch hour. But in any case, for those who are unfamiliar with Teams, if you want at the question and comment, there's a little hand raise icon. It should be located at the top of your screen. For some people, it'll be at the bottom. If you do that and you raise your hand, we can unmute you or enable your microphone, and you can unmute yourself, and then you can ask your questions if you choose to do so that way. If not, you can always put your question in the chat, and we'll take it at that particular point in time. With that, I want to introduce you to just a couple of the staff that are here. So our main presenter for this evening is Zach Romal. He is our project manager. And then helping out with technical support and also hosting is Tom Burke. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Zach.
All right, thanks, Mike. So let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. Okay, so we want to kind of start out, give a little background for this project, what's preceded it, how we got to where we are today. So back in 2015, the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors authorized a plan amendment for the Richmond Highway area, kind of came to be known as Embark among most people, and that revised the area plan, land use recommendations, as well as transportation recommendations. And so those changes included both bus rapid transit on Richmond Highway, which is now a fully fledged capital project moving forward, as well as active transportation improvements along the corridor, especially in the designated community business centers. Okay, and so in 2018, when that plan amendment was approved, the board directed staff to develop a funding plan for the transportation infrastructure improvements recommended in that plan. Okay, so here is the URL link to the county website. If you want to check that out either during or after the presentation, all the proposed projects are there. Okay, so there have been a couple phases of this project so far, and there will be additional ones after this. But right now, we are trying to do stakeholder engagement. We're trying to get feedback from the community on what we have so far. So the first step for staff was just identifying projects, casting a wide net, looking especially in those area plans. The graphic here is actually the transportation improvement recommendations for the PennDOT Community Business Center that might look familiar to people who are involved with Embark. But we also looked at the county's bicycle master plan and countywide trails plan, which also make recommendations for the corridor, and looked at missing sidewalks in the immediate vicinity of those community business centers and around the planned BRT stations, which are typically kind of right in the middle of those CBCs. So we did some project vetting. In some cases, the plan recommendations were a little bit unclear or sometimes even conflicting one plan to another. And so we had to reconcile and try to figure out which improvement really was intended. We also vetted those projects for relevance to this area. And now that we're at stakeholder engagement, we're trying to get feedback on kind of the overall project. Do we have the right size? Do we have the right scope, as well as individual projects that people like or that they see potential issues or challenges with? And so we're also here to answer questions, and our hope is that at the end of this process, we will be able to finalize or at least consolidate this list of projects. Once we have a more solid set of projects, the next phase would be to actually develop the funding plan, to identify potential funding sources, potential mixes of funding sources to implement the projects. That would require additional community outreach and eventual Board of Supervisors action. And finally, there would be plan implementation. As that funding actually becomes available, in some cases as development arrives and actually builds some of these projects directly, you would see the plan implemented over medium to long-term time horizon. Okay, so before we jump into the specific project list, we did want to share some photos and descriptions of common facility types, just to make sure everybody is kind of on the same page and picturing the same thing. So the first one of the most, probably the most common transportation facility in Fairfax County is the concrete sidewalk. So the current VDOT standard, which is shown here, is 5 foot wide. And that accommodates, pedestrians, wheelchair users, sometimes scooters and cyclists as well, depending on the person. Okay, another common facility type that we'll see in the project list is the shared use path. That, people may also call these, paved trails or just paths. They're asphalt facilities. The current VDOT standard is 10 feet wide. And they typically don't have a striped center line, but this one just happens to. Okay, and this is an on-road bike lane. Again, this is a pretty common facility in Fairfax County, gives cyclists kind of their own space on the road. And lastly, grid of street. So this is a somewhat less common one, but there are a bunch of these planned for the community business centers on Richmond Highway. They come in a few different varieties, but all of them accommodate vehicles. They accommodate active transportation users in some ways, in some way. The facility may vary. And they usually have development pretty closely abutting in a way that may not be as typical. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the specific project list. First are sidewalks. And again, this is these are in the immediate surroundings of the community business centers and the BRT stations. So we're going to start going from north to south in the corridor. Here's the North Gateway Community Business Center area. Here is Richmond Highway. And here is Fort Hunt Road. So you can see a handful of missing sidewalk links, sidewalk or trail links that were identified. Okay. The next one is Huntington Transit Station area. You can see here actually the Huntington Metro parking lot and North Kings Highway. And this is planned as the location for kind of the northernmost bus rapid transit station. And again, here we've got a few streets missing sidewalk links. Next is the PennDOT Community Business Center. Again, just to orient people, we've got Richmond Highway here, South Kings and North Kings here. Next is Beacon Groveton Community Business Center. Again, we've got Richmond Highway here, Beacon Hill Road here, and Southgate Drive here. And so a larger number of missing links in this area. And finally, sorry, not finally, but zoomed out here, we've got Hybla Valley Gum Springs Community Business Center. This is a bit of a bigger scale, but again, Richmond Highway here, Lockheed Boulevard here, and Fordson Road here. Next, we have the South County Community Business Center. There's the Jerry Highland Government Center, formerly South County Government Center, and Buckman Road. And now, lastly, Woodlawn Community Business Center and Richmond Highway here, Sacramento and Cooper here.
All right, so thanks, Zach. So what we'll do is we'll stop here for questions and comments for anything that you did see. I do want to point out that the sidewalks that were shown are kind of just outside the grid of streets. We didn't kind of combine the two. So when Zach shows the grid of streets, that's more comprehensive. So that's kind of why you'll see the differences there. I would also point out that yes, the scale might have been a little difficult, so we're happy to go back in and show you if you like. We also have all of these project sheets are on the website, and that's kind of where you got access to the meeting today. So we're going to take comments and anything questions you have through June 16th, and we note that at the end of the presentation as well. So with that, I just want to make sure that everyone kind of understands kind of what's being shown, as well as kind of when kind of you can give comments if you need to take some more time to digest the information. Supervisor Lusk. You're muted, Supervisor.
I've only been doing Zoom for I don't know how many years. This is insane. So let me start by saying mine's both a comment and a question. So I think staff has probably heard this before. Looking at North Kings Highway, particularly between Fort and its connection with School Street, that sidewalk segment, we've noted that it's not sufficiently wide enough even today to enable some of the pedestrian access, and then also let alone for any type of bicycle use. So I guess the thing that I was going to ask here is there any possibility that we could relook at that segment of sidewalk as a part of the project to figure out if there's something that can be done? Because the neighbors in this area, so it's like Jefferson Manor is the impacted community, and it's kind of near, for those who might not know, the nearest thing to it is the Mount Eagle School. So it's kind of like right in that vicinity. So we've noted that it's difficult for pedestrians, and we have a lot of curb cuts. People put their trash out like right in the middle of the walkway. So I think if we're going to allow for this pedestrian access in particular, we've got to really figure out how that might get some type of improvement.
Okay, so what I can say is it's a comment and it's something we'll look at for sure. We don't have it as a list of the projects.
Yeah.
In the past, it's been difficult because of it's very narrow through there.
Right.
It's hard to we can move the curbs, but only 1 or 2 feet. So sometimes the cost is just not quite there. So the only real option for us is to kind of look to see if we go a little bit beyond the existing right of way, which unfortunately means private property to acquire additional room to add those facilities. So well, if that's a comment and Crest, we'll look at that. We'll add it to the list and we'll bring it back to the board
Okay.
and the board collectively can make a decision whether to not include that particular project in the bucket of improvements.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. Let me see here. Next up is Jonah Gagnon. Tom, can you enable their microphone? All right, you have to unmute yourself, Jonah, but you're good. I can see it. And if you are talking, sometimes it's not paired up for anyone who it's
Can you
not.
hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
It
Okay,
was
perfect.
open and then it went off. Okay. In
Sorry.
addition to bicycles, which I assume you're going to have bicycle lanes, a lot of people are using the electric scooters. But more importantly, from my perspective, is because of the number of affordable housing and senior housing that's coming in. I've noticed around other senior housing, there are a number of people using mobility scooters that are 2 wide, 3 wide, where you sit and you're mobile on the sidewalks. So it gets very packed when there's people walking, as well as somebody trying to walking past somebody on a scooter. And I just like you to consider that with your sidewalks and trails and whatever. It's the bicycles, I'm hoping will be in a bike lane. I'm guessing will be, but the electric scooters and people for mobility reasons that are in wheelchairs and there's other scooters for seniors and that. So I just wanted to put that out there to keep that in mind as you're determining the width and how people can pass on these walkways. I think you'll see more of that as some of these projects come in on Route 1. That's all. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for that. So we'll go back and take a look and see what we can do. I will also point out, just for everyone, we're going through an initial list. As these projects get refined through additional design, look at utilities, additional public comment, if it's the desire or say policies change and 5-foot sidewalk is no longer standard, but a 6-foot sidewalk is now standard, that will all be reflected in kind of updates for this. But appreciate that. We'll take that comment into consideration and see what we can kind of do to augment any of these sheets that we have here. Alexis, you are next, Tom, and you're ready to go, Alexis.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. This is Alexis Glenn. I just want to echo what Supervisor Lusk brought up a moment ago about North Kings Highway and the pedestrian and bicycle safety. I understand, I've been participating in Embark for a long time, since pretty much the beginning, and North Kings Highway is the first and last mile of this new and excellent bus rapid transit system that's coming to Southeast Fairfax. And throughout this process, over many, many years, North Kings Highway has been left off of consideration for improvements time and time again. The part of the roadway that that we have brought up is 5 lanes wide, has 4 travel lanes and a turn lane down the middle. Those lanes are at a minimum 12 feet wide, and in some parts of the area are as much as 14 feet wide. I think there are plenty of standard and used before solutions that VDOT could look at to make space for people to safely walk to school, to church, to the many shops and residences along there without having to dig into people's front yards or other properties. So I hope, again, I'm here again begging on behalf of the residents here who primarily walk to the metro and to the shops and to their schools to please look at this and do something about it. We need safe passage in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the comment. All right. One moment. All right, there's a question that came in. I'll read it and then we can kind of go from there. It says, good afternoon. Obviously, this is everything north of Fort Belvoir. Do you have a plan in the works for projects the Route 1 corridor from Fort Belvoir to the Aquacon? Thank you. So that is not part of this particular funding plan. This funding plan just covers the Embark portion, which was Fort Belvoir to the Huntington area, including the North Gateway. As we get through this, if we go to the next part, Fort Belvoir to the south, we can take a look at that. There is a current Lorton plan amendment going on right now. So I think we'll wait to see how that shapes out before we actually go through and do maybe an effort along this particular segment to the south. But we'll want to make sure that the board gives us direction to do so and that it makes sense for us to do it. But I think just to make sure, we'll wait for Lorton to finish before we kind of tackle this effort to incorporate any changes that may be coming out of that plan amendment. Okay, Zach, we're going to go ahead and move along, get to the next part.
Okay. So next we want to talk about those grid of streets. So again, these were kind of concepts that were developed through the small area plans. We think these have been pretty well vetted. We don't really anticipate changes, but at the same time, they are conceptual, and it's primarily going to be up to development to implement these. So we'll go from north to south again, showing the North Gateway Community Business Center and an avenue type grid street and a trail. And again, Richmond Highway here, Capitol Beltway here. Next, the PennDOT Community Business Center. Again, we've got some trails, some avenue grid streets, and this should look familiar to anybody who is involved with Embark. And here's the Beacon Groveton Community Business Center. Again, Richmond Highway, Southgate, and Beacon Hill. The Hybla Valley Gum Springs Community Business Center. We've got Richmond Highway here, Lockheed Boulevard here. And finally, Woodlawn Community Business Center. Richmond Highway here, and Sacramento and Cooper here. So again, all of those are just representing what's in the area plans, what's already been approved and vetted. And the idea is, by including them in this list, is really to track their implementation, and in case there's an odd piece or there that isn't implemented through development, that the county would be able to budget for and build those. But we do anticipate the vast majority being implemented by development.
All right, so we'll take your comments and questions in this particular segment as well. Again, Zach noted, if you want to see kind of the cross-section of what these representative streets would look like, those are located in the comprehensive plan. So if you look for a local street or a collector or anything along those, or a livability spine, those will be located there, so you can kind of get a sense of what they look like. Let me go ahead and go to the Tom, can you unmute, enable Alexis microphone, please? Oh, and you're good to go, Alexis.
Thank you. Hi again. Could you please go to the slide showing the Cameron Run Terrace Trail in the North Gateway? Okay. I was curious, that Hunting Creek Road area that connects, so it's a little bit off of the map at the top, but that's where the Huntington Levee Trail is. And I'm wondering if you all know about or can speak to if there's going to be some sort of connection from there to where you're planning these improvements. I think right now there is a fence there, or that there's not formal access. It would be a great connection that would allow folks to get to that trail that goes into Old Town.
Zach, do you know if it's in one of our project sheets?
No, that's not something that is currently on our list, but we definitely can look into it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, and the next person up, Jason Zaragoza. Okay. Your microphone is enabled, so you have to mute yourself.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm unclear on some of these where you have avenues and it looks like livability spines going through where there's existing shopping centers. Now, are we talking about like completely redeveloping those areas, or just adding that? Like, because I know there was one in the Groveton one, I think, which showed it kind of going through where there's currently the Giant and all that, and then the Woodlawn one, yeah, so right there, that livability spine is going through where there's an existing store. Is that am I looking at that correctly?
Yeah, so I would definitely refer you to the Richmond Highway Area Plan. That has redevelopment options for these community business centers, shopping centers, you could also say. And so the idea was that when that redevelopment happens, that that these grid streets would be built or something similar to them. You know, these aren't precise locations really, they're more conceptual. So yes, those locations are right, but this isn't something that would happen before that redevelopment.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think, Zach, we can move into the next section.
Okay. All right, and then next we want to talk about some proposed trail projects. So like the grid of streets, though not really to the same extent, these could be built in whole or in part through redevelopment, but we're including them, or we're proposing to include them on the list so that they can be funded in the event that that does not happen. So for the sake of time, we're going to share the top 3 of these on the list, but again, all 8 are on the project webpage if you want to take a look. So the first trail proposal is for South Kings Highway. This would add a shared use path on the south side and a concrete sidewalk on the north side of the roadway. And this recommendation comes out of the Richmond Highway Area Plan. And just highlighting, this is Memorial Street here and Pickett Street down here, which is really the edge of the community business center. The next trail project is the Davis Street and Arlington Drive. And so this is another kind of common type of trail in Fairfax County. It's really a pass-through connecting 2 roads for active transportation users. And this recommendation comes out of the Bicycle Master Plan. And finally, the Pole Road Trail. So if you're familiar with this facility, it goes from Jeff Todd Way to Fry Road. In some cases, it's in good condition. In some cases, it's in need of an upgrade, and in some cases, and so this this project would achieve kind of a more continuous facility along that stretch. And this comes from the countywide trails plan.
All right, thank you, Zach. Again, we'll take your comments. So I just want to make sure that everyone, we just showed 3 of 8 representative projects in the area. So if you look through the sheets and you look through the list, you see that one's missing or you think one should be added. This is really why we're here. We really want to make, or if one should be changed or modified, let us know so that we can go through and work that so that we can kind of augment or change the list of projects. So with that, I see Alexis hand is up. Tom, can you enable? There you go.
Hi again. On the South Kings Highway Trail, you said it's going to start at Pickett. I ask because, so on the south side, there is a sidewalk that ends at a driveway that goes into the shopping center. And then there is just vegetation, no sidewalk or anything. And then there's Pickett. So I guess my question is, will this trail connect all the way to where that driveway is and the sidewalk ends, or is there going to be a gap between the shopping center and Pickett?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with the area you're talking about. I think the thing to highlight would be well, the intent was for basically for the kind of standalone trail projects to pick up outside of the community business centers. And so the idea would be for for there to be complete streets on the entire grid within the community business center, and then to pick up outside. Looking more closely at the PennDOT Community Business Center, I am not necessarily seeing that. So that's a good comment and something we can look into.
Great. And one other quick comment on that stretch of South Kings. A lot of people cross along that section from the residences on the north side to the shopping center on the south side, and some crosswalks along South King Highway. There's a number of intersections where crosswalks could go. So it would be great to get some of that infrastructure as part of this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no more comments or questions, Zach, let's move to the last section.
Okay. So the last project type is bike lane projects. It's worth noting that we have some A/B alternatives for these. Basically, one option which could be achieved either entirely or mostly within the existing roadway if space was repurposed to the bike lane, and an option B if it's determined that during the design process that that's not desirable and that it would be preferred to get some extra right of way and add the bike lane, but keep what's currently there too. So just like with the trails, for the sake of time, we're just going to look at a few of these. Okay, the first one is Memorial Street bike lane. And so again, the proposal is to implement this from the edge of the community business center to South Kings Highway. And this recommendation comes from the Richmond Highway Area Plan and the Bicycle Master Plan. The second project is for a bike lane on Arlington Drive. This is actually looks a little bit different today, but this is the connection with Dart Drive, and this is very nearly to the connection with Richmond Highway. And this recommendation is from the Richmond Highway Area Plan. And finally, the Lukens Lane bike lane. So again, kind of picking up at the edge of the community business center and going down to Old Mill Road. This is a good example where part of this road currently doesn't have curb and gutter. It currently doesn't have a sidewalk. So this would be not only a bike lane project, but a pedestrian project as well. Okay.
All right, thank you, Zach. And just to let everyone know, so that's the final group of projects. So if we will again take one more time to go through any of them if you also choose. But seeing there's our comment section. Alexis, you're up. And
Hi, thanks again. For these bike lanes, so I'm familiar with Arlington Drive and Memorial Drive that you showed, and there is those parking on those car parking on those streets. Will these bike lanes be in the door zone of those parked cars?
So the designs that we have currently are conceptual. So we haven't looked at details like that. Definitely, we would follow any best practices during design. But so I mentioned that there are kind of A and B concepts. I think the easiest, cheapest option from a design perspective would be to remove the parking. We did get concepts for both options because, you know, so that we'll have options, that we will have flexibility depending on what community outreach would produce during actual design. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I just want to emphasize how unsafe it is to put bike lanes next to parked vehicles. It's currently VDOT's standard operating procedure to do that. And I do not use a bike lane if it is in the area of a door zone because of how incredibly unsafe and dangerous it is. I understand that removing parking to put in bike facilities is politically challenging in a lot of cases. I would encourage you all to examine the safety implications of doing that and consider things like putting a two-way cycle track on one side of the street and allowing car parking to be on the other side of the street as an example of one solution to accommodate both folks who want to park their cars and folks who need to use bicycle and scooters and other mobility devices to travel.
Okay.
Thanks.
Appreciate the comment. So yeah, there's a detail. Obviously, we have some idea of like kind of what we looked at. We can look to see if we have door zones or not for the bike lanes that are being shown, what modifications might be needed within our project sheets in order to do that. If you zoom in on the project sheet, you can probably see a little bit more and kind of determine. But well, that's something we'll definitely take a look at and kind of look at during this comment period session. Okay, Zach, let's go through to the end, please.
Okay, so we just wanted to provide links again to the project webpage, but also to the Richmond Highway Area Plan. You can look there for kind of the land use recommendations and the grid of streets concepts for the community business centers and the countywide bicycle master plan and trails plan. And lastly, just once again, if you want to send us comments, you can do that directly on the project website, or if it's easier, you can call or email me directly. They all go to the same place and they'll all be considered and factored in. And we just ask that you send comments by Friday, June 16th.
All right. So that concludes the 4 types of projects that we're kind of putting together in terms of the funding list of projects. As we get your comments back, we'll take everything we hear. We'll go back and refine as necessary, add projects in as necessary as well to make sure that we pick up the gaps. We appreciate the comments that we've heard here today. So it will take us a little bit of time to go through and do that. But the next steps when they come back out to the community is you will hear from a different section of DOT that's going to start talking about, okay, here are the projects that we heard. Now here is the various ways that potentially can, we can look to start funding some of these particular projects. Look at to kind of go through different mechanisms, what's available, what's not, and so that everyone can kind of get a sense of how we go about doing it. And from that, you kind of will actually have a little bit of some idea what the cost might be. So, that'll be maybe a little bit more of eye-opening experience for some people, I guess. So with that, that's kind of what the next steps are, but don't look at it'll take a little bit of time to get that next piece together. So it won't be in the next like few months or this summer. It'll probably be in the fall or winter when we start to do that kind of stuff. If is there any other comments that people have or would like to make? We'd happily take those now. Again, Zach's information is on the screen. Should you want to call or email him with any sort of questions or comments, we're happy to go ahead and take anything that you have as well through the project website. So anything, by all means, we'll sit here for another minute or so just to make sure that we have everything that we need to, and look for the recordings to be posted next week. We'll get these out as soon as they become available. And I would say thank you to Supervisor Lusk for joining, and to your office, and to the Mount Vernon District's office as well. We have representatives from there as well. So thank you for joining. All right, seeing as it is people's lunch hour, I don't necessarily take any more time. So I want to conclude and say thank you very much for joining. Everyone have a good rest of the evening and enjoy the rest of your lunch. All right, let me stop.